I literally lost sleep over this. I don't even know how to describe it other than it's just been living in my head rent-free. Solar 3.0 bothers me, and I can't put my finger on why it bothers me. I sat up in the middle of the night thinking to myself, what is it? What is it about this particular rework that bothers me so much? I liked Stasis. Even when it was broken, I still kind of enjoyed the diversity and the playstyles and all of the stuff that came out of it. It frustrated me, but it at least worked. I really liked Void. I was already a Void main, so this just ended up making me happier. But Solar, for whatever reason, hasn't sat right with me no matter how I've played it. I've played every single class. I've explored every single idea, ignitions, tankiness, radiance, every single bit. You name it, I've tried it. I can't seem to make myself happy. And then one night I'm lying in bed, waiting for the chemicals that make my brain decide to repair itself and create new memories to kick in, when all of a sudden this new idea, this new brand new revelation just struck me like a brick on the back of the skull. I don't like Solar because it feels samey. This is now my 8th time trying to sit down and record this. Every time I've tried to, it's been difficult to put into words, so I'm going to try to nail it with this particular last attempt. This is not a complaint about the balance of the game. We've obviously talked about this in Tedium. Classy Restoration is annoying, healing seems to be a bit slightly overtuned, but, you know, that's Destiny. You love it or hate it, that's just the way it is. Balance comes and goes. What sucks about the things I'm about to talk about is something that I don't think Bungie can fix because they are probably stuck. They're stuck with the system that they've put out because people have adapted to it and they've, loved it. And that's a good thing. It's nothing wrong with people enjoying Solar 3.0. I'm not saying that you are a bad person or that somehow I'm smarter than you if you enjoy Solar 3.0 while I do not. When I asked people on YouTube polls what they thought of the different metas, they overwhelmingly thought that the Void meta was better, which is odd to me. Is this just rose-tinted goggles? This is just like a weird short-term nostalgia? Or is there something particularly about the Void meta that felt better? And I started to dig into that particularly. Also, when I asked about, if healing was overtuned, overwhelmingly, yes, it is. But again, Classy Restoration exists, so it's probably going to be a little bit biased. Stasis and Void. These each have a very similar structure. There are 14 total fragments, each of them having 6 key words. Void kinda technically has 6. I would argue it's more like 5 and 1 because suppression is difficult to get access to. But let me break this down. These 3 different types of fragments are buff types. These are straight linear buffs to something that you're already doing. For example, Whisper of Durance on Stasis just increases the amount of slows that you deal to a target. Straight up. Nothing extra that needs to be done. Key type fragments. These are fragments that allow you to get access to a particular buff or whatever that you couldn't get access to previously from your aspects. And then playstyle type fragments. These are fragments that encourage you to do a specific thing in order to get a reward. These are like mini games built in order to get you buffed up. I'm going to talk about very briefly the different types of grenades, melees, and supers, just so we can get a broad, overarching analysis of the world around Solar 3.0 before I then dive in specifically to what bothers me about Solar 3.0. So, like I mentioned, Stasis has 4 buffs, 2 keys, and 8 playstyle fragments. This is a shape that we'll see repeated many different times with slight variations. For example, Void 3.0, 2 buffs, 4 keys, 8 playstyles. For Stasis, there are 3 grenades, each of them specializing in a negative key word. Each class only has 1 melee, each of them specializing in a particular key word. And each super, even though all of them freeze, specialize in a particular key word. For Void, the same story. There are 7 grenades, which obviously we're taking this from an older system, so it makes sense. And only one of them allows access to a particular key word, that being suppression. Melees are a slightly different story because, again, from an old system. Each of these melees, again, have access to a different keyword. Titans are all over shields, where their shield bash also gets suppression effects. Warlocks get a volatile effect off of their melee, and hunters get weakened. Each super directly interacts with the keyword, except for Warlock. They don't interact with a particular keyword, but, Feed the Void exists, which grants Devour off of any Void ability kill, so, I think you could see an argument for that. Now, coming on to Solar. Again, 14 total fragments, only 5 keywords. There are 4 buff types, 2 key types, and 8 playstyle types. This is the direct same shape that the stasis had, so this by itself isn't very telling. When we get into the grenades and the melees and the supers, however, this is where we start to see the difference. Every single solar grenade, except for healing grenades, have access to a particular keyword, the same keyword, that being Scorch. The same goes for a lot of melees. Hunters have 4 total melees. If nothing else, Solar has done a fantastic job of allowing us to get access to new abilities, mechanically different-ish abilities that feel different depending on what you're doing. Anyway, Hunters have 4 melees, 3 of them interact with a different keyword, Scorch, Ignite, and Radiant. Warlocks have 2, both of them interacting with Scorch again. Again, Titans have 2, one interacts with Cure, the other interacts with both Scorch and Ignite. And the Supers, none of them directly interact with a keyword. All of them somewhat kind of do, but none of them directly play into it. For example, Ward of Dawn obviously gives you an overshield, a void overshield, but Hammers of Soul, unless you're running Soul Invictus, aren't going to summon sunspots or scorch targets or even ignite them. This is, I think, where the core of my problem is coming from. Again, it's not to say that Solar 3.0 is bad or unfun. There's a lot of people who are really enjoying this, but because every single class has pretty similar access to all of the keywords, and because their aspects aren't directly involving themselves in exclusivity on any of those keywords, every single class feels pretty similar to one another. Of course, a Lorelei Titan feels pretty different than a Starfire Protocol Warlock, but if you were to remove the exotics, they are pretty close, or at least you can build them very close to one another. What's worse is that healing and damage over time effects are some of the most frustrating things to fight in a game. To quote Castle, we all know how crappy it feels to get someone one shot and then they slip away. This happens in every game in meta, but this emotion is currently being amplified to an extreme. It's frustrating to have the work you put into an engagement erased in the snap of a finger. Whether it's your own fight or simply damage output for a potential assist, it's very demotivating and devaluing when the opponent resets to full health instantly. Conversely, if something is OP, whether it be armor or weapon, as annoying as it can be, it doesn't necessarily devalue your work. In other words, because healing is allowing people to just effectively undo the damage that's done, it feels frustrating to play against. And from my point of view, because every single Solar class has access to very similar tools, all of them are having the same frustration. Let me put it to a different way. When you're fighting a Void Hunter, they're going to have something that makes them frustrating to fight against, and that's invisibility. When you're fighting a Void Titan, they're going to have something that makes them frustrating to fight against, and that's their overshield. That is something that lives outside of their exotics. But Solar operates differently. Maybe it's a good thing that they do. I'm willing to listen to arguments in the comment section, but a Solar Hunter and a Solar Titan not having any exotics equipped can get really close to having the exact same frustrations. Damage them and they plop down a healing grenade and they just reset. That's frustrating. You get hit with a grenade, they cause Scorch, you're lit for an extended period of time. That's frustrating. A teammate nearby takes too much Scorch damage, explodes, causes you to get killed even though you weren't even remotely close to danger. That can be frustrating. It is nice to see different weapons built into different synergies, like, Skyburners getting access to Scorch just outright. That's cool. Something like the Rat King getting access to Void Invisibility, Agriceptor getting access to Stasis Slows. All of that is great, and I think that we should push even harder in on that to allow even better playstyles to be built and better builds to be built. But this homogeny is it's so hard to pin down. It's like a double-edged sword. My frustration in trying to pin it down just causes more frustration from the initial frustration I had about it being frustrating. It's a circle of frustration, and it's frustrating. What's worth pointing out is that Solar 3.0 had less time in development, presumably, than Void and Stasis. Both of those came on the backs of major DLCs, so they probably had a little bit more time before they were pushed out the door. I could be wrong on that, but it makes sense to me, where Solar was much, it's just a seasonal update. I'm hoping that doesn't hold true with the Arc changes. I'm hoping that Arc just doesn't feel like all the classes are built around, blinding and punching stuff. Boy, I hope that's not really bad foreshadowing. What do I think should be changed, as long as I've been ranting in your ear? Well, on a top-down approach, I think that each class should particularly build around one, probably two particular keywords. I think that Hunters should probably be built around Scorching and Radiant particularly, and maybe on another video we'll talk about what that looks to their actual kit. Warlock should be built specifically around Cure and maybe either Scorch or Ignition, or maybe some mix of the two, but primarily around Cure. And then Titans should be built around Restoration and Ignition. Again, there's gonna be a bit of overlap. This just has less keywords, which I'm sure is part of the reason that Bungie has made this the way it is. I also think that the fragments should probably be changed to where, you know, it's not just so immediately obvious what gets access to what. I don't know. It's frustrating to me. Is anybody else feeling this? Am I just some old man yelling at clouds, or is somebody else feeling the same thing where every single solar subclass feels so similar to fight that you might as well just swap them out? Obviously, a Titan's gonna be more tanky, and a Hunter's gonna have Caliban's hand for an explosion or whatnot, but if you're playing him in the default, if you're playing them in the neutral, too close for comfort, too overlapped, I don't know. Thank you for letting me rant at you guys for a little bit. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. If you enjoy my rants, leave a like. Anyway, bless your faces, and deuces.